Have you ever walked into a place and felt within seconds that people had decided who you were before you even said a word? Imagine walking through the door of a luxurious architecture office where everything shines, everything is calculated, everything seems designed to impress, except for the stares that fall upon you. Stares that measure, judge, and discard. That's exactly how this story begins. The atmosphere was sophisticated, quiet, and too organized to allow for any out-of-the-ordinary mistake. Glass tables, award-winning projects displayed on the walls, enormous screens showcasing million-dollar blueprints, and professionals walking briskly with the posture of those who believe they're on top of the world. It was into this setting that a black woman entered, dressed simply, elegantly, without excess. She carried no hurry nor insecurity. She simply walked with firm and calm steps, as if that place were not strange, as if somehow it belonged to her. But no one there seemed to see it. As soon as she crossed the reception area, the whispers began. Some looked her up and down. Others looked away, as if she were occupying a space she shouldn't. The assumption was immediate. Wrong visitor, lost employee, someone who didn't fit in with that millionaire architecture firm. Have you ever experienced this? When prejudice isn't spoken aloud but screams in gestures and expressions. The receptionist hesitated before speaking to her. An architect interrupted her to ask in a dry tone what she was looking for there. And even in the face of all this, the woman didn't react. She didn't justify herself. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't try to prove anything. She just observed. She observed every detail, every reaction, every sideways glance. There was something in her silence that didn't match the way she was being treated. Meanwhile, the office continued at its brisk pace. Important meetings were about to begin, multi-million-dollar. Contracts were to be discussed, and an influential billionaire was about to arrive to close a major deal. The tension in the air was palpable, and curiously, no one noticed that this woman, ignored and underestimated, seemed completely at ease amidst the elegant chaos of that place. She sat down, waited, calmly crossed her legs. She didn't touch her cell phone. She showed no anxiety. It was as if she knew exactly what was about to happen. What you are about to discover may surprise you, because not everyone who seems out of place is actually out of position. Sometimes they are exactly where they should be. Some employees exchanged low comments, others cast impatient glances. After all, who did she think she was to occupy that space? In an environment where status speaks louder than character, that silent presence seemed like an invisible challenge to the unwritten rules of power. Stay with me until the end, because this story is not just about humiliation, but about the fatal mistake of judging someone by their appearance. And as the clock ticked on and the office hubbub grew louder, a question began to form, not on the lips of those judging her, but in the minds of those observing this story now. Who is this woman after all? What does she know that no one there imagines? The answer is closer than it seems, and the next moment will completely change the course of everything you think you've understood so far. And as this scene unfolds before our eyes, it's impossible not to feel a tightness in our chest. Because on some level this story touches on something many people have experienced. The moment you realize you've been judged before even having the chance to show who you really are. Maybe it wasn't in a sophisticated architecture office, maybe not in front of influential people or a millionaire's environment, but the feeling, that's universal. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Sometimes putting it into words is also a way to free yourself. Stories like this don't exist just to shock or entertain. They exist because they reflect real, silent situations that happen every day and go unnoticed. When you comment, you're not talking to yourself. You're creating space for other people to recognize themselves, feel less isolated, and realize they're not exaggerating what they felt. And if at any point you felt underestimated, ignored, or devalued, your voice here matters more than you. Imagine, if this story has captivated you so far, liking the video is a simple yet powerful way to show that this type of content deserves to continue existing. This helps the message reach more people who might need to hear exactly this story right now. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and carry forward stories of poetic justice, social upheaval, and truths that aren't always spoken aloud. And if you feel that this type of story provokes you, makes you reflect, or even reconsider situations in your own life, subscribing to the channel is a way to walk alongside us, because what comes next delves even deeper into this story, and the following scenes will reveal attitudes, silences, and decisions that change everything. Stay tuned, because when someone is wrongly underestimated, the downfall of the one who judged is usually as surprising as it is inevitable. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's precisely at this point in the story that the power play begins to become explicit. The office doors open wider, the atmosphere changes, and his presence is felt even before any formal introduction. The billionaire enters as someone accustomed to being obeyed. His tone of voice is firm, sharp, impatient. He doesn't ask for information, he demands it. He doesn't suggest paths, he dictates. And every step he takes reinforces the idea that, in that environment, he believes himself to be the ultimate authority. The professionals around her immediately adjust, shoulders straighten, smiles appear, compliments are carefully exchanged. There's a silent choreography when someone powerful enters the scene, and everyone seems to know exactly what role they should play. Everyone except her. The black woman remains seated, observing, without changing her posture, without rushing to please. And that, in itself, seems to disturb more than any words could. His gaze finally meets hers. First quick, almost automatic, then longer, heavy, with judgment. There's an uncomfortable pause, and then comes the first sentence, spoken too loudly to be just a casual question. He wants to know who she is, what she's doing there, if anyone authorized her presence in that space. There's no curiosity, only distrust mixed with contempt. The message is clear: you don't belong here. She tries to answer, but he interrupts her, as he always does, as it has always worked for him. Interrupting is a form of control. He talks over her, dismisses her before. Listening reduces her presence to a logistical error. Perhaps a lost visitor, perhaps someone who went to the wrong floor, perhaps someone who should have been waiting outside. Each word pushes the woman into an invisible corner of the room, as if her existence there were an inconvenience to be resolved quickly, and the hardest part of all is realizing how the environment allows this. No one confronts him, no one questions the tone. The collective silence becomes complicity, because when power and money mix, many people prefer not to see, not to hear, not to take a stand. Have you ever experienced something like that? That feeling that the humiliation doesn't just come from one person, but from an entire system that validates this behavior. The billionaire continues. He makes comments about competence, about wasted time, about people who don't understand how things work at that level. He laughs briefly, ironically, as if he were teaching a lesson. But it's not a lesson, it's a display. A demonstration of dominance based on the certainty that no one there will contradict him. The woman again doesn't react as he expects. She doesn't lower her head, doesn't apologize, doesn't over-explain. She just listens. This contrast begins to bother him, because in the mindset of someone accustomed to being in charge, the other person's silence should signify submission. But there is something different here. There is control. There is choice. There is a conscious decision not to play that game, and this disrupts the balance in the room. The hidden truth begins to take shape behind the scenes, still invisible to him, but increasingly perceptible to those who observe attentively. As he speaks, the imaginary camera of the story lingers on the details, the embarrassed glances of the employees, the tension in their bodies, their held breaths. All of this builds the impact of the moment. Because it's not just an isolated act of rudeness, but a calculated public humiliation, designed to reinforce hierarchies and make it clear who's in charge there, at least in his version of reality. What he doesn't realize is that every arrogant word he speaks is paving the way for his own downfall. Every time he belittles someone, he exposes himself. Every time he interrupts, he reveals more about himself than about the person he's trying to discredit. This journey isn't just about external power, but about mindset, about how some people confuse position with worth, job title with character, money with truth. The woman remains composed. Her eyes scan the room, as if recognizing every detail, every architectural choice, every decision made in that space. There is an almost disconcerting calm about her. It's not indifference. It's awareness. It's someone who knows exactly where she stands. And at that moment, even though she is treated as invisible, she already sees far beyond what everyone there can imagine. The impact of this moment lies not only in the humiliation itself, but in the silent preparation for something greater, something that involves revelations, transformation, and a complete reversal of positions that seem so well defined now. Because when someone believes too much in their own power, they often forget that there are truths that are not announced. They are only revealed at the right time. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's precisely here that the story shifts in tone, almost unnoticed. After the harsh words, the constant interruptions, and the heavy atmosphere that settles in the room, something curious begins to happen. The woman doesn't react, as the traditional script dictates. She doesn't try to over-explain herself. She doesn't engage in direct confrontation. She doesn't shrink back. She chooses silence. And this silence isn't empty. It's full of intention. While the billionaire continues talking, justifying his impatience, reinforcing his position, trying to reaffirm his control of the environment, she responds only with what is necessary. Few words, short sentences, a firm gaze. There is no fear there. There is reading. There is strategy. There is someone who understands exactly what is happening behind the appearances, in the backstage of that power dynamic. Her silence is starting to bother him more than any curt response. Because for someone used to dominating the space with their own voice, not being the absolute center of attention is almost an affront. He expects resistance or submission. What he finds is something more difficult to deal with, someone who offers no reaction whatsoever. With each passing second, he talks more. He explains too much. He exposes himself more. And he doesn't realize that he is digging, word by word, his own grave. The others present begin to sense it as well. The atmosphere changes again, but subtly. It's no longer just awkwardness. It's a kind of silent expectation. Some look away from the billionaire and observe the woman more closely. Others seem confused, trying to understand why this person, treated as someone out of place, demonstrates such tranquility. There's something there that doesn't fit with the initial narrative. She observes everything. The tone of the conversations, the layout of the room, the designs on the walls, the names signed on the blueprints. Every detail seems to fuel an inner certainty. It's not arrogance, it's familiarity. It's knowing the way. Even when they pretend she shouldn't be there. This is a silent journey, made of calculated choices, of decisions that don't need to be announced aloud. The billionaire, on the other hand, begins to stumble over his own confidence. He makes misplaced jokes, comments on wasting time, and reinforces how valuable his time is. All of this sounds like a shield. The more he talks, the clearer it becomes that he needs to prove something, perhaps to others, perhaps to himself. The hidden truth begins to take shape in this contrast. Whoever truly controls the situation doesn't need to raise their voice. Her silence becomes a mirror. In it, the billionaire sees only the reflection of his own behavior, and this generates irritation. He tries to provoke her, asks rhetorical questions, casts glances expecting an emotional reaction that never comes, but she remains there, whole, aware of the impact that moment will have. A transformation is happening, still invisible to many, but inevitable. This is the kind of silence that carries power, a silence that observes, learns, and waits, a silence that understands that not every battle is won with words. Sometimes winning means allowing the other person to reveal exactly who they are, without interruptions. And the more the billionaire speaks, the more evident the difference in mentality between them becomes. One believes they are in charge because they have money and status. The other knows they occupy that space for something much more solid. Behind the scenes of this scene, something bigger is falling into place. The pieces are in place. The revelations are drawing near, even if they haven't yet been verbalized. The impact of all this lies not only in the humiliation suffered, but in the silent preparation for a reversal that goes beyond that office. It's a lesson about control, about presence, about understanding the right time to act. She takes a deep breath, crosses her legs again, and maintains a serene gaze. There is no rush. There is no anxiety. There is only the certainty that this seemingly small moment is part of something much larger. And it is precisely this calmness that begins to make everyone uncomfortable, because when someone remains firm in the face of attempts to diminish them, something is about to change. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it's here that the atmosphere in the room seems to change density without anyone being able to explain exactly why. The silence that was previously merely uncomfortable begins to feel heavy, almost physical. The billionaire finishes a sentence abruptly, expecting yet another reaction that doesn't come, and for a brief moment everything is suspended. It is in this minimal space between one frustrated expectation and another that something rearranges itself behind the scenes. She rises slowly. There is no rush. No theatrics. The gesture is simple, but it immediately draws attention, as if her body were finally occupying the space that has always belonged to her. Some eyes rise, others look away. The billionaire frowns impatiently, as if that movement were yet another disruption of the order he believes he controls. He still doesn't understand, but the dynamic has already changed. Her voice is firm, clear, without raising its tone. There's no need. She speaks few words, chosen with precision, and each one crosses the room with an impact that's hard to ignore. She introduces herself, not as a visitor, not as an employee. She states with absolute tranquility that she is the founder of the firm, the mind behind the designs that decorate those walls, the ultimate authority there. The hidden truth finally finds its voice. For a second, that feels like an eternity. No one reacts. It's as if everyone needs time to reorganize their own beliefs. The shock spreads in silent waves. Someone swallows hard. Another adjusts their posture in the chair. The receptionist's eyes widen slightly. Her name begins to make sense. The signatures on the blueprints connect. The architectural decisions take on a face. Everything that was previously ignored now reveals itself as too obvious to have been seen before. The billionaire pales. His body, which had previously occupied the room with excessive confidence, seems to shrink a few inches. The ironic smile disappears. His jaw clenches. For the first time, he doesn't know exactly what to say. His mind races, trying to retrace his steps, revisiting every word spoken, every interruption, every gesture of disdain. The embarrassment is immediate and profound. It's not just about having made a mistake, it's about having exposed himself. The change in demeanor is almost painful to watch. His tone of voice softens artificially. His words are chosen with exaggerated care. An apology disguised as an explanation emerges, a hasty attempt to contextualize his previous behavior. He tries to regain control by offering justifications, but the power is no longer there. The transformation happens before everyone's eyes, and there's no going back. She listens, just like before, but now the silence has a different weight. It's no longer defensive, it's sovereign. She doesn't need to humiliate back. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need to prove anything. The revelation has already done all the work. The journey of that moment culminates in something greater than a simple role reversal. It's a silent lesson about mindset, about hasty decisions, and about the impact of underestimating someone. The employees watch in silence, feeling the weight of their own inaction. Some seem ashamed, others relieved to finally understand what that silence meant all along. In the emotional backstage of the room, a collective reassessment takes place. Who is this woman? How did they not notice before? How many times have they repeated similar judgments without questioning? She speaks again, now with a little more context, explaining the reason for her presence there, the meeting that was scheduled, the project that would be discussed. Everything sounds simple, logical, professional. There is no revenge in her words, only clarity. And this, curiously, increases the impact even more. Because when someone doesn't need to crush the other to show strength, the message becomes impossible to ignore. The billionaire nods in agreement, too quickly. Arrogance has given way to caution. He begins to listen more than he speaks, as if belatedly trying to learn the language of the space he thought he dominated. The room, which previously seemed to belong to him, now revolves around him naturally, almost organically. Authority changes hands without fanfare, but with complete clarity. This is the climax that doesn't depend on shouts or applause. It happens inside each person who witnesses the scene, a revelation that turns the room upside down, not because someone was exposed, but because a truth was placed exactly where it should always have been. And when that happens, nothing remains the same, even if everyone tries to pretend everything is normal. There are still consequences to be faced, decisions to be made, silences to be broken. The impact of this moment continues to reverberate, shaping attitudes and redefining positions in a way that no one there can fully predict. Because some revelations don't end stories, they open doors that can no longer be closed. Comment below, "This makes sense to me." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because, after the revelation, nothing there is ever exactly the same again. The billionaire tries to react quickly, like someone who realizes they've lost their footing and needs to cling to any possible explanation. He talks about misunderstandings, confusing schedules, pressure, difficult days. The words come out hurriedly, less firm, almost rehearsed. It's no longer the voice of someone in command, but of someone trying to repair damage that has already been done. And everyone notices this. The atmosphere in the room changes completely. That tension, laden with arrogance, dissolves and gives way to an awkward, more honest, almost educational silence. Some people avoid looking directly at him. Others observe the woman with a respect that didn't exist minutes before. It's curious how quickly perception changes when the truth is finally revealed. What once seemed invisible now occupies the center of everything. She takes control quietly. She doesn't make long speeches. She doesn't retaliate in kind. Her posture is firm, yet serene. She sets the agenda for the meeting, organizes the next steps, and directs decisions with clarity. Every gesture carries dignity. Every word reaffirms her authority without needing to prove anything. It is at this point that it becomes evident. True power doesn't need to shout to be heard. The billionaire begins to listen. He interrupts less. He agrees more. He asks questions. And carefully, the man who entered believing he dominated the space now tries to adapt to it. The transformation is visible, not only in him, but in everyone around him. In the emotional backstage of that room, something is reorganizing itself. People rethink behaviors, remember similar situations, revisit judgments they made without realizing it. This is poetic justice that doesn't humiliate. It teaches. It doesn't destroy. It reveals. The woman doesn't need to explicitly say anything about prejudice or appearance. The situation itself does that for her. Each embarrassed glance, each prolonged silence, each change in posture carries a lesson that is difficult to ignore. How often is the error not in the lack of information, but in the mentality with which one perceives the other? The impact of this moment goes beyond that architecture firm. It touches on something deeper, almost collective, the idea that status, money or influence gives permission to diminish someone falls apart when, confronted with reality, the hidden truth always finds a way to emerge, even when attempts are made to stifle it with titles and positions. She continues the meeting as if it had always been this way, and in fact, it always has been. The mistake wasn't in her presence there, but in the misinterpretation of those who thought they could define value by appearance. This silent journey, from an unnoticed entrance to the assumed leadership, carries a strength that doesn't depend on applause. It depends on awareness. In the faces around us, one can perceive reflections that continue even after the words cease. Some people learn in that instant, others resist internally, but none emerge unscathed from the experience, because when arrogance is exposed without scandal, the learning tends to be deeper. The transformation happens from the inside out, and perhaps that's the greatest lesson that lingers in the air. Those who truly hold a position of authority don't need to prove anything. They don't need to belittle anyone to feel great. They don't need to use their tone of voice as a weapon. True power is revealed in posture, in decisions, in the calmness of someone who knows exactly who they are and where they stand. There are still consequences that unfold after that moment, perspectives that change, relationships that need to be reviewed, attitudes that can no longer be repeated in the same way, because certain experiences mark a silent but definitive turning point. And this story, even if it seems complete at first glance, continues to reverberate far beyond that room. Comment below. This makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this story resonated with you on some level. Perhaps it triggered a memory, perhaps it sparked reflection, or perhaps it simply confirmed something you already felt but had never put into words. If this type of content makes sense to you, if these stories help you see situations with more clarity and awareness, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to continue this exchange. That's how we keep this space alive, bringing more stories that reveal what many people prefer to pretend they don't see. And if you want to leave a record of knowing you were with me until the end of this journey, write in the comments, "This message was for me." Sometimes a short phrase says it all. A like also helps show that this connection really happened, that this conversation didn't go unnoticed and deserves to reach more people who might be going through something similar. There's a video over here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into this reflection. Click on it and continue reading with me there.